All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Faith Lutheran Church's conversation about a responsible restart. You can see the date where we're attempting to do that on May the 24th, 2020. Our restart will be a restart of both 8 and 10:30 worship services. So tonight we have as a special guest with us, George Cooper. He's a member of Faith Lutheran Church, and he'll talk a little bit about his credentials and how he's worked with various issues that'll make him, I mean, we're hesitant to say an expert because we have so many experts out there talking, but has a lot of insights. And I wanted to make him available for those of you viewing to ask questions. So by the way, you can ask questions now, but if you share the video later and we get a question, we'll do our best to respond to that. I'd like to start with a scripture passage and a prayer tonight. This is from 1 Peter chapter 3, and this is part of the letter where Peter's giving advice to the churches in general. And he gets to this part where he wants to talk to everybody, and he's saying, hey, here, everybody, these are the things we need to be doing. And I think this is important for the church to keep these things in mind. These are adjectives, so they're describing what we're to be about. He said, finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. So let's pray. So Lord, we want those things, especially where there's so many emotions and feelings, concerns, things that make us tremble, so many unknowns, so much information, and a lot of it clashes. We pray, oh Lord, as your churches consider coming back together, that they would do so safely in a way that glorifies you and protects those we love and who we desire to reach. We ask your blessing, oh Lord, on our conversation tonight. We thank you for George and the task force and all the work that they did. And we ask your blessing on those that are viewing and on their questions, that we might truly, Lord, come together with a common unity as we step into another time of unknowns. All these things we ask in the name of him who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, George, why don't you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about you? There is a link to George's bio on the description of this video if you'd like to look further. So, George, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Pastor. I'm actually it's a little interesting to do this sort of thing because there's so many mixed emotions out there about COVID-19 and what we have to do. But I approach this from the perspective that I've been a registered nurse for about 45 years now. And I've had a total of 52 years in healthcare as a registered nurse. And prior to that, I was a medic in the Navy. And within the last 10 years or so, I've worked for Cleveland State, and I teach hazmat classes and decontamination procedures for both hazmat and chemicals and radiation safety. So this is how I've approached this particular subject for the COVID-19 and where we need to be to do a responsible restart. The other thing we've been doing is we've been keeping a close eye on what the governor and the director of the Ohio Department of Health have had to say. And so a lot of what I have put together for the board, along with the help of Mary Beth, my lovely wife, and also Linda Gill as the task force, came from what the director of the Ohio Department of Health has said. So that's how we've approached this. So I'm not going to say much more about my credentials. I think I've said enough. I just think that there's a lot that needs to be done to make sure that we're ready to do a responsible restart. And we wanted to make everyone aware of that. So well, with that, I'll open it to you for questions, or if there are any other questions. I have some other things we can say as we're ready to do that. So where would you like to go next with this?
Yeah, real quick, are there any major questions that people have right off, or can we just start asking George? I have a few questions for George about COVID-19. Let me ask you one of the hard questions, George. You know, obviously, a lot of people are at risk, 75 and older, perhaps even younger, depending on what we've seen. People say about it. A lot of people are saying, I'm going to wait until there's a vaccine. Um, isn't it true that many of the SARS viruses, we've actually never come up with vaccines for them?
Well, there are viruses that I'm not aware that there are vaccines for all of them, and we had talked about that earlier. There are other coronaviruses that are out in in the public setting. Even the common cold apparently is a COVID type virus, and there's no vaccine for the common cold. There are vaccines for many of the other viruses, though, and I think that from what I've heard, they're working on a virus, or rather on a vaccine for this virus, which might be ready earlier than later, but it has to be tested first before it'll be available. There are other coronaviruses, though, COVID-2, which is SARS, and there's another one called MERS, and they're not real common in the United States, but nonetheless, they're out there, and I'm not aware of any vaccines for them. There may be, but it's not readily available to us if there is. Next question. Okay. What do you?
Here's what I'd like you to do now, if you don't mind. Let's talk about the three pillars of safe restart, and that would be time, distance, and shielding. Our congregation's going to be hearing more about that in a video announcement this Sunday, but maybe we can kind of go through how would you help people get ready if they decide to come back to church during the reopen?
Well, I think that's really a good question. So let me start out first by saying that it's important for all of us to understand that COVID-19, which is this coronavirus that has impacted everybody so seriously, isn't going to go away. This virus is going to be with us for a long time. And let me give you an example of that. Just like the influenza viruses have been around a long time, this one isn't going to go away either. And the example of that is in 1918, when the Spanish flu hit the United States. It took somewhere around 670,000 lives in the United States. And it was because people didn't have immunity. So we, by and large, don't have immunity to COVID-19. And that's what's creating the problem. So what we wanted to do was make it possible for everybody to understand how we can return to corporate worship by putting it into three simple words. And that would be time, distance, and shielding. So what do we mean by that? So time. So as we start out looking at that, until our risk from the virus can be reduced through the use of a vaccine, we can be safer by spending less time around other people. So we're asking that everyone arrive no earlier than 5 or 10 minutes before the service, enter the sanctuary, go right in and take a seat, and then leave directly after the service. We'll have some ushers on hand, I understand, that are going to help do that. There's a team you're putting together that would help to direct people where they could sit and how to exit the building. But let me give an example of time. If it were raining outside if I were standing out there and it started to rain, the longer I stand there, the more likely it is that I might get soaked in the rain. So if it starts to rain and I go in under shelter, I have less exposure to the rain. So I'm not going to be as soaked coming back in. And that's the way it is with the virus. If the virus is in our presence, if somebody has it in the church, if we stand around and we linger for a long period of time, we could very easily run into that virus just talking with other people. The other is distance, which is the second word that we talked about in our mnemonic. Is that how you say that? Mnemonic? Anyway, it's keeping a safe distance from others, and that'll help us reduce our exposure. The Ohio Department of Health said that it would be best if we if we keep our distance to be at least 6 feet away from other people. So the way to do that would be when we see other people to give them a virtual handshake or a virtual hug, not walk up to them and shake hands and try to have contact with them. But we're also going to ask that children stay with their parents in the sanctuary. Would not be a good idea for children to be running around, going into other rooms, playing with other children, and that's going to be the hard part. Children want to go play with their friends. They don't understand that that it's not safe for them. But the second part of distancing would be for those who have a fever, who don't feel well, who have a cough. We really would like them to keep their distance the maximum by staying home. If they don't feel well, they're not sure whether they're sick or not, or if they do know they're sick. Either way, it's best if they not come to church. So that would be something we would ask. And the reason for that, and I think if people understand why that's important, they could have this virus for 2 to 3 days before they're even aware, even before they have a fever. They have the virus, they're starting to shed the virus, but they haven't developed any of the symptoms. So it's better if they don't feel good to stay home. And quite often we've gone to church or other places and somebody will say, well, I don't really feel good, so don't shake hands with me today. They really should stay home. And then while we're practicing those safety measures, we want everyone to know that they should consider worshiping online. We never stopped worshiping. That was the one thing that I appreciate that you've done. We still continue to worship, and that option will still be available. So what this means is those who are 60 or older, if those who have problems with their immune system, if their immune system is compromised, or if they have a heart disease problem or cancer or something like that, it would be better for them to stay home because they are very susceptible to this particular virus. And again, the reason why they're susceptible is they don't have immunity. That's why this is a problem. So if somebody's not sure whether they should come to church or not, they might want to give you a call or just look at the guidelines from the Ohio Department of Health, and that will help them understand and know what they should do. The third thing would be shielding. And I'm sure everyone is aware now when they go to the grocery store or go to the hardware store, they have the plexiglass shields up. Well, that's one of the ways we could shield from other people. Restaurants are going to put barriers between tables, and I think one of the restaurants is even going to put up shower curtains between tables so that they can partition those off. So that becomes a shield. Well, one of the shields that we have are the very simple face masks that we all can wear. My sister made some and sent them to us. So that's in a way is a shield when we put our mask on. And the mask itself doesn't protect me. If I put this mask on, I'm not protecting myself, but I'm protecting you. If I have the virus, or even if it's a common cold, or if I had influenza or anything, the mask is going to absorb some of the droplets that I'm exhaling. Little tiny droplets that we can't even see, kind of like an aerosol bottle, and you spray it going out into the atmosphere around us. So shielding is really critical. According to the Ohio Department of Health and CDC, they recommend that people wear a mask. And also hand hygiene. That's something we can't repeat enough, to wash hands or use hand sanitizer, because as we touch things, we can pick that up and then we're touching our face, or we're touching our another surface, and we're possibly contaminating those things and infecting other people. So these are temporary conditions. There are many other, maybe other questions people want to ask, but for this period of time right now, these are things that are really necessary that we do. And if we do this right, and the governor has said this over and over again, if we do this right, we can resume normal activity, and we can also prevent the spread of coronavirus or even influenza. So we really want to move forward. I'm sure you'll have other announcements about this in the future, but we want everyone to remember time, distance, and shielding. And I think we can show our love for Christ through looking out for one another and trying to protect them from this virus.
Yeah, so what we're asking is, at this point, no one should feel compelled to attend if they have a concern for their health or the health of another person that they live with. Like, if your spouse is immunocompromised, you might consider not coming back to worship. And again, we're going to remain online. We're going to live stream our Bible studies and things like that. It'll be awkward that first Sunday coming in and being shown where to sit after all these years sitting wherever we wanted or our favorite pew. But that'll be different when you come in. We're not going to say that you can't interact with people, but we're going to try to keep people from touching and whatnot, because keep in mind that it may be okay for you, but it could be highly concerning and dangerous for another person. So we want to be mindful of other people's feelings, perceptions when we're together. We are, like George said, encouraging you to take your temperature prior to coming to church. If you don't feel well, feel free to stay home. No fist bumps and elbows.
Right.
We're not going to be doing that. A lot of times after church, people wouldn't shake my hand because they came to church sick. Yeah. And then also, if you come and you don't have a mask, I think most people have a mask that they can wear. We will have some on site for people. We don't want that to be a barrier if you don't have that item, and you'd be welcome to use one of ours. Actually, ours are disposable, so use it once and then it's thrown away. But
well,
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, to add to what you just said, that's a good point, because these masks are cloth. So after we've worn them a time or two, we really need to wash them, because they're collecting our germs, our viruses, our bacteria from our mouth. And if we keep them on and don't ever wash them, we're going to keep rebreathing the same bacteria and viruses back in. So we want to make sure people do a little hygiene with their mask as well, if they can't throw it away.
Yeah, somebody asked about the kids walking out with me. That's going to be suspended temporarily. It doesn't mean that they couldn't walk out, but they won't be holding hands with me. And we will have rooms in the building marked off to say we're not currently using these. Part of that is our team that's going to be sanitizing the building in between services really needs to limit the amount of space they have to sanitize. So we don't want to clean every room in between all the services and activities. Also, during that first relaunch day, we're not going to have our Bible studies. Children's Sunday school is suspended for the whole year. So hopefully we'll see everybody back in fall. But Sunday morning Bible study for adults, that's currently, that's going to be a Sunday by Sunday thing, but we will be streaming it. But at this point, we don't want to prolong the time we have in the building, because we do have teams of people that are going to be trying to sanitize and whatnot. But we'll get there, and it takes time. Yeah, somebody mentioned, any thoughts on asking children to stay home? Yeah, at this point, sorry, George, you want to respond to that first?
Well, you go ahead and make your comment, and I do have some thoughts on that.
Yeah. Nobody's going to be told anything. That's something that's very important. People are going to need to make good choices. If you bring your kids, you're going to have to follow. It's going to be harder for your child than normal, but we as a church are not going to say, yeah, if you're not this age or you're too old, you're not coming. We're not going to enforce it that way. It's going to be a lot of personal responsibility.
Well, there's a couple things with children that I think is important to understand. The first thing is they may not get as sick if they get the coronavirus, although there are some really disturbing reports coming out of New York right now, children who've had coronavirus coming down with another disease that it causes inflammation of all the major organs. It's called Kawasaki disease, and I think it's been pretty rare, but they're seeing a number of cases still in New York. So that's something, and those children have been deathly ill. The other thing is, even if the child doesn't get sick from coronavirus or from COVID-19, they go home, they might pass that along to an adult or to a grandparent, and that person then passes it on to other people or gets really sick. So the less we can put those children in that situation, the better. It's hard for children to understand that they can't run and play with their friends. And I think everybody knows that. We don't want to deprive them of that, but that's why children aren't in school right now either, till they can kind of sort that out and figure it out. It'll be fall before kids go back to school.
Yeah, and the other thing is we want people to understand that when you come to church, it's going to be like when you go out to the other businesses and whatnot. The rules don't change. They're not going to be suspended in this place. We may not have that rule. You can't bring your child in, and we might not have those rules. But when you come in, we're going to expect everybody to social distance, come in and go. Keep your children with you. Those are expectations we're going to communicate. So hopefully people in general, just as they've complied in our culture, for the most part, that'll happen for us at church too.
Well, and even with masks, the governor and the director of the Ohio Department of Health have not mandated that we wear a mask. However, it is so strongly recommended that there are some people who have taken the position that I'm not going anywhere if people aren't wearing masks. But when I'm out and about at the grocery store, I only see about half the people wearing a mask. And I think it could be a concern if you're too close. If you're 10 feet away from somebody else and you don't have a mask on, it really isn't going to be as much of a problem as if maybe you were 3 or 4 feet away from somebody else. Then you really want to have that mask on, not only to protect yourself, but to protect the other person.
And it's really kind of a little thing to do if it puts another person at ease. Just because you may be comfortable not wearing one. What we practice in the church all along is it doesn't matter how you feel alone. We're a community, and we need to take into consideration those around us. And if that's a barrier, what an easy barrier that we can overcome by just wearing the masks.
Well, and the governor and the director of the Ohio Department of Health recognized that some people can't wear masks. That they may be claustrophobic, they may not be able to breathe, they may have a respiratory problem that makes it very difficult to breathe. And if they don't feel safe, then they shouldn't go out. They really should stay home. That's the first thing. And as long as we can continue to worship online, I think that those people will be better off staying where they are. They haven't left us. They're just not on site with us in the building. And the building isn't the church. We're the church. And what's I think more important is if we can help them have the sacraments, be able to participate in communion and baptisms and those things. But those are things that I think you already talked about, finding a way to make those happen. And
yeah, we're probably going to do the Lord's Supper by appointment. There'll be Lord's Supper Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and you'll make an appointment. We'll make sure the groups stay small, no more than 10, or depending on how many people use it. But we're still I want to work with a team of people to kind of talk through what that's going to look like. And like you said, keeping our hands washed is part of shielding. People are forgetting that. Originally, what they told us is, wash your hands, because that's where you're going to come in contact, and that's what's going to help a person shed that virus. So, during your time in the building, I think it's important that hands get washed when you get out of your car and different things like that. We're probably not going to do the gathering in the cars. One of the reasons I didn't do that is our church has the most awkward parking lot ever. We have 2 separate parking lots. So, people are parking on both sides of the building. That's one reason. And then the other one was the government actually considered those still gatherings. Even if you show up to church in a car, when you're gathering people together, even if they don't go in and out of their cars, some churches were rolling down windows, passing out sacrament. We waited on that because it didn't comply as we were being coached with the no gather, stay at home. Now, as that's lifted, I think we'll be able to safely do communion, maybe not in the sanctuary, but in some ways minimize how much hand-to-hand contact there is during the Lord's Supper. But we are going to be doing it again soon.
Well, it would be a good idea if people carry a little hand sanitizer with them before they take the communion themselves. And of course, you would wash your hands before administering communion. But let me mention something about hand sanitizer. The overuse of hand sanitizer can be hard on the hands. It can actually dry the hands out, crack the hands, and then it opens the skin for possible infections or other issues in that. So it's better when we can to wash our hands, and to wash our hands for 20 seconds. The way we used to teach this in the hospital was get the nurses to sing "Row, row, row your boat," which sounds kind of funny, but that's about 20 seconds. So to get the children to wash their hands for a long enough time, we could have them sing as they're washing their hands. They could sing "Jesus Loves Me" or something like that, and that would be a good timing mechanism so they can do that with effectiveness.
Yeah, I've heard pray the Lord's Prayer.
There you go. Yeah, or your favorite, one stanza of your favorite hymn, maybe. About 20 seconds is what we want to do. And use soap and water, dry them well, and then they should be good to go. That's more effective than anything. In fact, that's probably more effective against some of these viruses than using hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer doesn't kill every virus either. There's some that are more resistant to certain hand sanitizers or disinfectants. So, yes. So what other questions do we have?
Well, I have a question that we're working on. I've kind of talked to you a little bit is at what point can I safely visit shut-ins again? Currently, the nursing homes are completely locked down, but I have another families that are not in nursing homes that are in their homes. What procedures can we use with time, distance, and shielding with shut-ins?
I think the biggest thing is if you were going into a home, and it's difficult to answer that question. How sick are they? How far can you stay away from them? If they're not sick, or they don't have a fever, if they're just shut in at home or a place where you can visit them, there's probably little risk. If they have a fever or they're not well and they know that, they should not open their door to you. So that's probably the first criteria with this. And then again, it's time, distance, and shielding. So if you were to wear a mask, if you were to go in for 10 minutes versus 60 minutes and reduce the amount of time you actually spend with them, then you're minimizing your risk or their risk. And you were talking about nursing homes. My mother, as you know, is at an assisted living facility, and I went today to visit her, and I had to sit outside. I took my little stool with me, a little lawn furniture, and I sat outside her window, and it's like a jailhouse visit. So, anytime we can do the shielding and the distance away from someone, that'll help minimize our risk.
Okay.
So hopefully that answers that question. So no more questions, huh?
Well, one of the things that I don't really have any questions off the top of my head. Anybody that's viewing right now have any questions? You can go ahead and type that into the live stream. Post a comment and we'll be able to answer that best of our ability. What would you say, George, to someone that says it's too early?
Then I think they should consider staying home, worshiping online.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the things maybe to help while we have a couple minutes left to explain why the viruses are so lethal. Uh, we don't have any immunity for the most part. Unless I have the COVID-19, I have no immunity to it. So all those several thousand people now who've had it and survived, they have some form of immunity. Once we have a vaccine, most of us then, those who take the vaccine, would be pretty well protected from the virus. Viruses, though, are different than bacteria. They're very small. They need a cell in the body to replicate or make more virus copies. So it's not something that's very easy to control. It's very difficult, in fact, to control that. The best protection would be to have antibodies. And the only way to get antibodies is to either get it or to get a vaccine. And until we have those things in place, we don't have enough immunity for the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah. Somebody asked George in the comments, do you have any suggestions for a person trying to plan a wedding?
You know, I think the Ohio Department of Health has an excellent website, and there are a number of recommendations. In fact, if you go to that website, and it's coronavirus.ohio.gov, and you can find all kinds of things, how to protect yourself, what kind of disinfectants to use, and so forth. But the recommendations that I've heard from the director of the Ohio Department of Health is you just can't have big weddings, and you still have to maintain social distancing. And I don't see the bride and the groom kissing at the altar with their masks on. I think that would be a little peculiar, but maybe there's some way to get around all that. And and funerals too has been a real problem. I've heard of funerals where they've been doing it on Zoom, and people have been staying home, or they're planning to have a memorial later on after the person's been buried. So all those are just really difficult things right now.
It's a good question. I do have a wedding scheduled in July, and we've had lots and lots of conversations about it, but it's kind of hard to say anything definitively because the information changes day by day.
It does.
For the most part, it doesn't change. You know, time, distance, and shielding doesn't seem to be changing, and those are the pillars. But in terms of sizes of groups and things like that.
Yeah, we had a very large family reunion that we hold every other year that was planned for Father's Day weekend, and it was just canceled yesterday. It was very disappointing because we know that there would be people coming from all over the country, literally about 100 people, and we were planning on meeting up at Ruggles Beach here near Vermilion, and it's not going to happen. And we're all disappointed, really sad, because we all like to see each other, which is a very interesting thing for families to actually like each other and want to spend time together. So, but we're disappointed by that.
George, what advice would you have to me as a pastor or to the church to kind of fill in the gaps of physical touch, handshaking, and all the importance of those things that comfort us? You know, is there anything we can do to replace that in this new world where?
You know, that is an excellent question, and physical touch is critical. They see that with young children in orphanages who have no physical touch do very poorly. They have failure to thrive, and it's really a very difficult situation. And people want and really need to have touch, but right now what we need to have is understanding. Touch is not what we need to do unless we have immunity to COVID-19. So for the time being,
what would you say to a person? What would you say to one of our members who really wants to come back, but they're immunocompromised and they can't, but they feel disappointed because we're kind of reopening, but they're not included in that?
Well, the governor has said if people don't feel safe, they should not go out. If they don't feel safe, they need to stay home. Don't go to the grocery store. Get somebody else to do their shopping. Don't go to a restaurant. Don't go other places, and churches included in that. If they don't feel that they can do that, they really should stay home and not feel guilty about it. This is not a matter of somebody sinning because they're not coming to church. If they can attend worship online, then that's really what's critical here, is being able to worship with us and not feeling guilty. It's not a sin if they don't come to church if they can continue to worship.
Yeah, pandemic doesn't prevent us from praying.
No.
And worshiping in spirit and truth. Somebody mentioned they're 80, they're in good shape, they want to attend church, ... And then another person asked, what's up with the terms COVID and Corona? Could you say something on that? But what would you say to somebody that's older, in good shape, good health? Can they come back?
If they feel safe, the governor has said that they should do what they feel safe doing. There are greater risks for someone who's over 60. Let me give you the statistic. People who die from influenza-like illness, about 70% of them are over 65. So about 70% of people who die from influenza-like illness, maybe get pneumonia after they've had the flu, they're over 70 years old. So the same thing is true. Most of the deaths from COVID-19 are people who are over 50. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that coronavirus is just a family of viruses. They look like a little crown, a little sun. And you can't see them in a microscope. You need an electron microscope to even be able to see them. They're that tiny. But that's where coronavirus comes from. COVID is probably, it's a shortened name. They give these things names like that, but it's coronavirus 19. So COVID is how they abbreviate the name.
And the 19 is the 2019 version of that virus.
I assume that's what it is, but COVID-2 is another type of coronavirus that's out there. And the other example, I used this the other day, and this is a different kind of virus, but the norovirus is named after Norwalk, Ohio. That was where it was first identified. And I don't know how it came about that it was there, but you can tell how fast that virus is transmitted, because whole cruise ships come back with half the people on board with gastrointestinal illness from that particular virus. So they give them kind of strange names. So I'm not sure exactly how the 19 came about, but it probably was from the year that it was identified.
Yeah, I think they have these little coding. A scientist knows exactly what COVID-19 means, but the street name was coronavirus. That after that kind of the crown look on it, and you can see that. Somebody asked, this video will be logged. It's on YouTube and it'll be on Facebook until they delete it. I'm not sure how that works, but yeah, you're welcome to share this video. And by the way, you can comment if you're not watching this live and you have a question, go ahead and comment, and we'll be looking through these and trying to answer them even after the conversation's over. The whole goal is that if we're going to do a responsible restart, everybody needs to kind of get it in their mind when they're coming to church, they're coming back to some changes, and changes for the good of the people who come back and the good of people that we interact with. And so again, the pillars are going to be time, limiting time together, distance, and shielding. So namely keeping your hands clean so that when you touch surfaces, you're not transferring anything. And no doubt these are things that have always been true, always been threats, and have always been a part of the church. But this gets our attention in a different way when we see the loss of life that we're experiencing in our communities. So.
Well, Pastor, you raise a good point there. This is not the first time that our world has changed because of something like this. And it's going to be a different world. After 9/11, the airline industry changed. We now have to take our shoes off when we go to the airport. We have to go through TSA. So many things change because of bad things that are in the world. And this is just another one of those. We're going to see the long lines at the grocery store standing 6 feet apart. That's not going to go away anytime soon. It may never go away. It's just something we have to get used to.
Yeah, well, I thank you, George, for all the work you and your team have done and for your willingness to kind of coach the governing board as we took this as a very serious conversation, and we're having weekly meetings where we talk about, are we really ready to do this? And just so that the information's out there, we don't want anybody coming to church because they feel guilty if they don't. We want you to make the best decision for your health and the health of others around you. But it looks like soon, in smaller numbers, we're going to be regathering for worship.
Well, and as you pointed out, we come to worship. We don't come because we feel guilty. We don't stay home because we feel guilty either. You know, that we've been shamed into staying home because the government said we had to stay home. But we come because we want to worship, or we stay home to worship because we don't feel safe going out, and we don't feel guilty either way. But, you know, we show the love of Christ. That's our compassion for one another by taking care of each other. So,
right. It's not a time for cavalier behavior, but compassionate behavior. And it doesn't matter whether we feel like somebody's, overreacting. That really doesn't matter for us as Christians because we care about our brother. Yeah. And even if they're overreacting, we can give grace, a lot of grace to each other so that people feel comfortable.
Well, in fact, I had asked a colleague at one of the hospitals here in the Cleveland area if the hospitals were acting out of prudence or if it was out of panic. And he said it's a little bit of both right now. They were a bit panicked because they had no idea what to expect, but they were being prudent in what they were doing. So we don't need to act out of panic, but we should act out of prudence. And I think that's what you're doing. So thank you for asking us to serve on the team. We're glad we're able to help.
Yeah, one of the things they said early on is the whole reason that we're doing the stay at home was to protect the healthcare system, which it really looked like it did. I've asked around to people that go in and out of the hospitals. They're not overloaded, at least not in our area. I'm not speaking about every area. But, with this reopen, if there's a chance that things flare up again, we'll be back to making those hard decisions again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what they're concerned about. And that's why they want to go slow. But here's the evidence. If anyone is willing to or has an interest in this, if they go to the CDC website and they look for the flu statistics, and they're posted out on the CDC website, they don't have the final analysis for the current flu season. But the number of flu hospitalizations dropped like a rock in March. So that proves that all the efforts they made limiting our being in close proximity to other people, keeping a safe distance, staying at home, isolating ourselves if we weren't feeling well, really paid off because we were on record this year for having a very high flu death season. And so I'm glad they did what they did. But the other part of the problem is that gives rise to conspiracy theories. I heard one yesterday from a family member who said, well, they must be making this up because it wasn't as bad as they said it would be. Well, it wasn't as bad as they said it could be because we did what we did. They said, stay at home, keep a good safe social distance, and sanitize our hands, wash our hands. People did that, and it reduced the number of deaths in Ohio. They could have been 10 times worse. And all you have to do is look at New York City or Los Angeles, and the number of deaths there are just, it really is heartbreaking to see how many people died in Italy, for example, or New York City. So Ohio has been kept safe, and we want to do this in the church.
I know it's an American sport to talk about government and whatnot, but I always try to tell people in those conversations, that's fine. It's a free country. You can criticize the government or like this or that, but it's really about good practices as a personal citizen. That's where our focus needs to be. Our focus needs to be on what we're doing, how we're governing ourselves. That's what's going to keep people safe. There's plenty of other people doing, some good criticizing there. And there does need to be accountability at all those levels, but I'm personally responsible for my own actions. And I want to be doing those good practices. Somebody mentioned about how do people feel about going back. There are some people that are absolutely super excited. Most of them have been low risk. I have some really godly people that I love to death. They're not coming back anytime soon because it's just not safe. So it's a whole different world for pastoral care because in the old days, pastoral care didn't include people that chose not to come. But now that is a reality in our culture that many really need to choose not to come. And we need to figure out ways to minister, keep them connected to the community, reach out compassionately to them.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thank you everybody that watched. Thank you so much. We love the questions. Feel free to continue to post and we'll try to answer them. And I think we're about to sign off. So George, any parting thoughts you have for us?
Well, it could come back and it could get worse again. It could spike again in the fall or in the winter. So if we do what we're supposed to do, if we follow the guidelines that the governor and the director of the Ohio Department of Health have given us to follow, we can help minimize it and take responsibility for that ourselves. We can't wait for the government to do it. We have to do it ourselves. So again, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Great comment there. I totally believe that. And we'll just end with the way I've been ending our services and Bible study. Stay safe and stay faithful. All right.
Excellent.
God bless. Good night. Thank you again, George.